Today we're learning the Maamar Vata Titzave 1981, and we're on page 402. Let's get right to the text, and we'll go from there. The Rebbe says we can connect what we learned earlier about the difference between Mesiras Nefesh and Kosis and being crushed because of the Golus im Hamavur ba Maamar, with what's explained in my father-in-law's discourse, his Maamar, the Feder Shakosov, in his interpretation of the verse, quote, V'ata Titzave b'nei Yisrael, you shall command the Yidden, v'yichu elecho, and they should bring to you shemen zayis, olive oil, goimer, etc. De la'achre, Moshe Yitzave v'yikasher as b'nei Yisrael. After Moshe will connect and bind the Yidden with Hashem, as Yisrael, Oz Yaviu Yisrael leMoshe shemen zayis. Only then shall they bring the oil to Moshe. This is a very interesting interpretation. Right? When we read the pasuk in the Torah, Hashem commands Moshe, tell them to bring it. It's like 1, 2, 3. The Rebbe, look at his, he's very precise. No. The first thing is Moshe has to do something. Barring Moshe doing what he needs to do, then bringing the oil to him is not what I want. That's what I understand from this text. And what's the first thing Moshe has to do? He has to be makasher, he has to bind and connect the Yidden to Hashem. As we learned earlier in the Maamar, he instills emunah and feeds emunah within the Yidden. He feeds the emunah, instills the emunah as Hashem instills it, but he feeds it and sustains it and enlivens it and brightens it and shows you how to use your emunah. And through that, you have a connection, a deeper connection to Hashem. And when that takes place, then the oil is meaningful to be brought to Moshe. So this is such a 180-degree twist on the regular pshat. Because the regular pshat is, you just bring it to Moshe. Moshe is just an intermediary, a messenger, handing over the oil to Aaron. It's not what he says here. He's saying here that if Moshe has to accomplish the hiskashrus of the Jews to Hashem, and only then is it meaningful to bring him the oil. And barring that, don't waste your time. And let's see what he says further. Yidden through their avodah yosifu gilui. Here's also a novelty in his interpretation. We learned it earlier, but he says it here clearly again. When the Yidden bring the oil to Moshe, it's not just to bring him as a messenger, it's to give him something he doesn't have. So, in other words, this is the interpretation of the verse according to the Rebbe and the Maamar here. Moshe gives the Jews something they don't have, and the Jews reciprocate by giving Moshe something he doesn't have. Completely different than the literal text. And it's not a contradiction. Someone asks you, it's a very nice taich, but it's not the pshat in the verse. The answer is right. That's pshat. And this is soid, remez, not remez, soid, chassidus, and it's a deeper interpretation of the verse. It's not a contradiction. In other words, Chaim Zev, what happened, you just picture yourself in the time of Moshe. You and I are Yidden at the time. Moshe gets a commandment and he tells us, bring oil. We bring him the oil. The question is, what did Moshe command? And what did we do? So you'll say, well, Moshe commanded we should bring the oil. And what did we? We brought the oil. The answer is, of course. But what was going on in your head? What was going on in your mindset? In your consciousness? That's what he's saying here. So it's not a contradiction to the literal meaning, is that bring the oil and to Moshe, and Moshe will give it over to Aaron. And that'll happen. The question is, what was the kavanah pnimius in that action, in that interaction, in that dialogue. Let's continue. The Rebbe says we possibly could say mehabiurim bezer b'avodas ha'adam. The Rebbe, as you all know, his style was, in addition to giving us the intellectual, deeper insights into concepts in Torah, he always brought it home. And that's what he does here. Mehabiurim bezer, amongst the explanations, b'avodas ha'adam, how we are to take this idea in service of Hashem. Continuing, the Zeh Moshe Mitzavah, page 404. Umekasher as Bnei Yisrael, the fact that Moshe, connects the Yidden to Hashem, who Shuzon umefarnes es Emunah. I said that earlier, that he sustains and feeds our Emunah. She'Emunah tia neisiv al kemoishehi mitzad hagiluyim dineshama. That our faith should be in addition to our given soul revelations. Everyone has a neshama. You have a neshama. The neshama has tremendous power. So the Rebbe says, fine, but has nothing to do with Moshe. That's Hashem. Hashem gave us a neshama. So he's saying that what Moshe does for us is somehow and in some way makes that neshama thrive more than it had on its own. So that's what he called the words. Look at the text. He used giluyim, the neshama, means the revelation, the manifestation of the soul, means the neshama that we got. And in the parentheses, he says, like he said earlier in the Maamar, the soul of above that Hashem gives us sees godliness. So for that, you don't need Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, technically, if we are able to tap into the neshama, if we on earth are able to tap into the neshama above, and which our neshama above sees godliness, and if we're able to tap it in and open the faucet, we're going to see godliness too. The problem is we have a goof. And the goof obscures the neshama above as it is in the neshama below. So it doesn't see godliness. And therefore, let's continue. Gam mitzad etzem haneshama. Not only do we seek to have an experience that we see godliness, which either we do or we don't, depending on the obscurity of our body, but Moshe teaches us and feeds our faith that doesn't require that. Fascinating idea. In other words, the norm is the neshama above sees godliness. If we can access that, we're going to see godliness. The problem is we don't, because there's an obscurity, a goof, a nefesh habamis, a yetzer hara. Says the Rebbe, I understand. But guess what? You have something that you don't need to come to that. And that's called the etzem haneshama. And the etzem, the essential soul, is even greater than the riyas haneshama, than the seeing of the neshama. Because remember, the seeing means something outside I see. It's not you, as we learned earlier in the Maamar. Etzem haneshama is me, is I, is us. And what does Moshe do? He teaches us how to access our real self. And for that, there's no conditions and there's no limitations. It's called etzem haneshama. And he says, possibly could say, this is the meaning in the verse, Vata Titzave Bnei Yisrael, you Moshe shall command the Yidden, the Loshen Vata Titzave Bnei Yisrael, this language, Mashma Shemoshe Mitzave, it is Moshe who connects, and he says in the parentheses, Mekasher Umechaber, he binds and it connects, it's Bnei as Bnei Yisrael, the Yidden Atzman themselves. Vata Titzave as Bnei Yisrael. You are to command the Yidden, they themselves. Ki mitzad etzem haneshama, because from the perspective of the essence of the soul, Kol Yisrael heim chad. All Yidden are one. In other words, what is he? What is he saying in this bracket here? In other words, this is his question that his rhetorical question that he's retorting to. There's answering without saying it's a question and an answer. If you tell me that we're looking for the etzem haneshama, the essence of the soul, people are different. How can the bringing of oil? How can this commandment of Vata Titzave touch all of Israel? Kol Bnei Yisrael. And the Rebbe says, you know why? Because all Jews are one. All Yidden, even the right, Isser the Charedim and the Ham Charedim are all one, whether we like it or not. Sorry.
I think we use the word the collective.
The collective. Thank you. So when you touch the etzem haneshama, we're all one, the collective. V'yideu avodah the Yisrael, and through the avodah, the service of Yidden, la'achri shenimshach b'Yisrael, kilu etzem haneshama yidei Moshe, after the essence of their soul is revealed within them through Moshe, who teaches us and feeds that concept within every one of us. Shagam koiches hagiluyim, so that also the revealed and manifested powers shalahem within the Yidden, and in parentheses, which he called earlier hatzir da koiches, the imagery of the powers. In other words, the particular nuance of chesed shebe gvura and hoy shebe yisoid. That's what he means here. In other words, not only does it touch the overall chesed, gvura, teferes, but it touches my style of chesed is in such a way. Your style of teferes is in another way. So all those details are called siyur, which is what we're going through now. The 49 days of Sfira is all about the siyur. We don't just say 7 weeks, 7 midos, and that's it. No. There are nuances and details. And that itself is godly, experiences the etzem haneshama. As we said earlier, if that itself doesn't touch isn't experiencing etzem haneshama, you have the breakdown that in the oppressed countries, you were willing to give your life. You come to a free country. That's the free country. Remember this is like the seer of the neshama. Why? Because the free country means, in this situation now, I don't need Mesiras Nefesh, so let me relax and chill out. The tzir means that also in the detail of my particular style, right? Chesed Sheb Gvura, Gvura Sheb Chesed, every single detail, there too I experience etzem haneshama, which means Mesiras Nefesh and everything else when needed. Or even not Mesiras Nefesh, but as the Rebbe said, the Kosses feeling that, how can I rest on my loins if Mashiach is not here, if we're still in Golos? That constant fire burning in you. Let's continue. Yiu matimim le'etzem haneshama, that the tzir hakochos, the imagery, the details, the particular nuances of the powers of our being should be matim, should correspond to the message of etzem haneshama. And if it doesn't, that means it hasn't reached it. Now you say, when you think about this is such a piece of chassidus that you could think about, be mizboinen, when you daven. It'll show how distant we are. But B, more important than the distance, is how important it is to hone in on the details. Many times people on the generality, they're great. But when you start honing in on the detail, let me look at your chesed. on myself. Let me look at my chesed. Is my chesed genuine? Is my chesed altruistic? Is my chesed modest? Is my chesed on and on and on? That's details. And that's what he's saying here. Etzem HaNeshama has to be expressed through the detail and the nuances, which we call in the Maamar in Chassidus the tziyur. So it's very nice to say, oh, this is a Shena Yid. You know, the expression, this is a nice Jew, meaning, oh, he's a respectable Jew. When he comes into shul, we give him the place up front, right? Because he's a Adam Chashuv. Ask the Adam Chashuv. I told you that story over and over, but it's such a, when this prominent Chabad Chassid from generations of Chabad was at a meeting in 770 to appoint the next rabbi or rabbis for the community, the Rabbanim, after the previous, this is 1985, 86, 87, one of those years. And it seemed like they're going to elect people who didn't come from Chabad pedigree as the Rabbanim in Crown Heights for the Chabad community. This is like creme de la creme in Chabad, right? This is the hub. And he and others backing him were very perturbed and disturbed. And he got up and he marched out in front of everybody without saying anything, but it was obvious that he was very disturbed that he wasn't appointed, feeling that he, with his pedigree, and he had pedigree, and he was a Baki in Shas, and in Kabbalah, it was a major, major Talmud Chacham. Probably, in a way, more than some of the elected Rabbanim. You hear that? But the community needed an English speaker and someone who was more social, and they didn't vote for him. And I wasn't there. I was already out in California, I believe, on Shlichus. But I was told about this. What came out is that the tziyur HaNeshama of this person in that particular little detail was not masin to the Etzem HaNeshama. Because the Etzem HaNeshama in that case, I'm really concretizing this and actualizing a real life experience, so you have a clear understanding of what we're talking about. The Etzem HaNeshama in that case is, if the community elects a Rav, and that's the system in the community, then it's God's will. And who are you to challenge God's will because you come with this and this yichus? That's not God's will. That's your will. That you think you're better than the others because of your yichus and everything else. But it's not God's will at the time because there's an election. So that's, I think, a good example to explain that tziyur HaKoiches, how there should be matim, correspond to the Etzem HaNeshama. What do you think about the mashal, Isser? You think it's a good mashal?
Yes, it helped explain it very much.
Chaim Zev, you too? Good.
Yes.
I'm just saying that you have to, if you use this mashal in our own lives, it I think clarify things. It doesn't mean we should, God forbid, poo-poo someone who's a Adam Chashuv, and yet he has a little gaiva stuck someone, a little mouse over there is creeping somewhere. He's a Talmud Chacham. He needs to be given respect. But push comes to shove, when you talk about the Re'ei Emunah, or as it says in the Maamar, Moshe feeding and sustaining faith within us, that's what we're talking about. And it's, in a way, it's very uncomfortable. Because when a person is an Adam Chashuv and he's a person who's accomplished, it's very hard to listen to others and respect others. Imagine, if I may say this, you're a physician or doctor, and someone will come and upend certain theories of yours, or So a person who's bottled, if the person saying this is truly, wiser or knows more, and is a mensch, we listen. We listen. We listen and we humble, and we're humble. I'm the physician. I'm the rabbi. A rabbi needs a rabbi. A rav needs a rav. A mashpia needs a mashpia. You know? The Rebbe.
As long as they don't say I read it on the internet.
Yeah. Or I got it through AI. But the Rebbe had his father-in-law to check him out. Really. You know? There's no such a thing. The Babich Rebbe, I'm saying you're saying, well, how's that? Well, that you have to ask him. He somehow communicated with his father-in-law even after he passed away. That's beyond my pay grade. But that's what he said publicly many times, you know, and there were people, for example, his own brother-in-law who, you know, like said, cut it out. He didn't say that, but he thought that. But he thought that in the beginning. And then a year later, he saw this guy he is able to communicate. Because he said, I go to my father-in-law's gravesite, the previous Rebbe, and he don't talk to me. I don't walk away with messages. He told me to do so, A and B. And my younger brother-in-law, the Rebbe, not only does he say it, I see that he lives that, and he really is connecting. But that's, you know, that was his opinion. But the Rebbe did always check with his father-in-law. Again, I say clearly, you know, a rational person who's not a chassid or not a believer in all these things is going to say that's absurd. Okay, that's their business. So they're not plugged into the whole concept of Rebbe, Tzaddik, grave sites. You go to Shimon ben Yechoy, Miron, Yaini, right? People, mamish, tell over, mamish, or Isser shared with me last week something, you know, his practice and his job and all that. You know, that's an individual thing. But these spiritual messages do happen. So the point is, if you're a person that can connect that way, kol hakavod. But if you can't, you know, it's like, you know, after Gimel Tammuz, and some of my teachers who I respected in Mashpiyim, you know, they were very kind of mashiachistic, and I said to him, you know, hey, if you see the Rebbe and you hear him after he passed on, and I knew this person, I said, okay, I'm not on that level. I can think, and I can meditate, and I can reflect, and I can, you know, but to me, you know, he's not walking around, and I don't see him with my physical eyes. If a person who is a genuine person says he doesn't need pills. He has tremendous moon, and there's something beyond me. I'm not going to go and poo-poo that just when it is worthy of poo-pooing is when you're hacking a chinik, when you're full of it. Excuse the expression. You know, like, come on. You're going to go and be mean to people, rip people off, indulge in food and other taivas, and you see the Rebbe and you hear him. Come on, cut it out. You know, like, there's a system here in our Torah. Sur me ra vasei tov. You know, change your behavior from ra, bad, evil, no good, first, and then I say tov, then do good. Especially when it comes to these ideas of communicating with an neshama, with a tzaddik, and all that. Okay, we're going to stop here, and tomorrow we'll continue the Maamar. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Good day, Rabbi.